Thank you for being here with us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? Well, so I'm going to preface this by saying I don't tend to stand behind a podium, so I may walk around a little bit. One of the things with today is you've learned a lot about a bunch of different subjects. So I have been in your seat. I have been a caregiver. I have been a caregiver through a major hurricane, and it's a big challenge, right? So when we talk about lessons learned, that's really the best we can do, right? Not repeat the same mistakes, make things better for the next time around. This guide has a wealth of information. There are 4 traditional hazards when we talk about hurricanes or tropical cyclones in general. The wind, right? And a lot of that is based off the Saffir-Simpson scale. Most people are familiar with that, category 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 hurricanes. But there are 3 other hazards that have nothing to do with wind. Anyone name one of those hazards for me? Flooding rain, okay. There's another type of flood. Storm surge. And then there's a last one that we all encountered a little too closely last year with Milton. Tornadoes. Right? And all of those hazards are very different. So when we talk about preparing for those hazards, we like to separate them into 2 camps. Wind, right? The wind and the tornado are kind of in one camp. The water stuff, let's call it that, is in another camp. So in this book, there's a map. And if anyone opens the page to the map, it has a map of Broward County, and you'll see that there are 2 colors on the map. And those colors are based off of modeled planning information with storm surge. Okay? That doesn't talk about rainfall flooding. So if we have 20 inches of rainfall around here, we all know what pretty much happens around Sawgrass Mills when you have a lot of rain, right? Yeah. The swamp reclaims what belongs to it. Yeah. At the same time, though, for those of you that are along the coast, anybody here live east of Federal Highway? Yeah. So the vast majority of this room, if you're west of Federal Highway, storm surge is not your main concern, right? It's going to be wind, tornadoes, and flooding rain. But for those of you east of Federal Highway, that storm surge question is going to take the majority of your assessment time, your threat assessment time. So that's where I have a lot of experience. So my parents live in Lee County on the other coast, and they used to live here in Western Pembroke Pines. They retired and said, we want to live somewhere where we can see the water. And that was exactly my reaction, shoot. So I was like, okay. So they decided, they found a piece of land in 1999 where they had a tidal canal in the backyard that was within, I don't know, earshot of the Gulf of Mexico. I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. I can feel it now. So in 2002, they built their house. The house was spectacularly prepared for the wind damage that could happen with a major hurricane. 2002, right? 10 years after Andrew, the code was pretty strict. It was pretty hardened. Great, straps on the roof. Garage door had braces, all the latest and greatest. Then came 2004. The house went through its first major hurricane eye wall with Hurricane Charlie. Lee County did not ask us to leave. Even though we were in the category 2-ish zone, right, that second category. Why? Because the modeling didn't support leaving. Those decisions are really important because there is a cost to every decision, right? And I'll bring this up in a little bit. So let's fast forward from 2004. We didn't have any issues with water getting in the house, thankfully. However, needed a new roof. The roof was kind of laying in the side yard of the house by the end of the storm. So we fast forward to 2005, the next year. Wilma. A lot of people are saying, oh, I was surprised by Wilma. There's one lesson the Weather Service got out of Wilma. By the way, our office is responsible for 6.5 counties in southern Florida. So while we're in Miami, we work in Broward County. Part of our territory includes Palm Beach County. I have Glades, Hendry, and Collier on the west coast, and mainland Monroe, where the alligators and the park rangers live. Okay? The main objective that we have is not only to provide those weather and water predictions, but this public education piece. Because I don't want you running for the hills in Georgia, because guess what? We saw with Helene last year, that doesn't always mean you're going to be in a safer situation. It's a very measured thing. So let's go back to Hurricane Wilma. What did we learn from Hurricane Wilma? People focus on black and white way too much. That skinny black line, how many of you love the cone? Does the cone tell you anything about impacts? No. Ooh, that's good. Does the cone tell you where the peripheries of the storm are going to be? No. Just the center, right? And it only captures it 2/3 of the time. That means 1/3 of the time the beast is out of its cage. So what do you use then to make decisions where you don't have clear information when you need to pull the trigger? Right? My mom's 76. Do you really think I can explain to a 76-year-old why it's really important for her to rush and get her cat, get in the car and drive over here in rush hour, in the rain, when it's dark? And by the way, she doesn't see out of her right eye. Right? That's not a realistic expectation. It's not the same as any of us maybe that can just, oh, we're just going to do this or do that. You have to plan for it, right? And by the way, she sees part of the tidal basin of the Gulf of Mexico in her backyard. Did I mention that? Okay? So obviously we have to have a plan as a family. And that usually involves Robert going over there and putting up 1 million shutters because she wanted as many windows as was humanly possible for the architect to deliver at that time. Right? How many of you have been in that situation? Right? And so planning is really important, but also being able to assess the threat. Do we need to put up shutters for tropical storms? That's a question I get frequently. Shutters are normally devices for hurricane force winds to protect your windows from airborne debris. So typically, no, you put them up for hurricane force wind threats. However, Robert, Wilma was supposed to go on the west coast. We got hurricane force winds in West Broward. I didn't have my shutters up then. I always put them up now. How can I tell the difference? So one of the biggest things that has been developed in the 20 years now since Wilma is you have the skinny black line, right? And then you have a safety margin. The safety margin accounts for 9 out of 10 oopsies. There's always that 1 out of 10, okay, at that point, it's impossible, right, to just account for every single, it's not economically viable, and there could be diminishing returns on the way things end up being, especially when you're moving folks around that are at risk or are vulnerable to medical issues, okay? But that is a really important thing, and we actually make it really easy for those 4 hazards. It's color-coded, it's called a hurricane threat impact graphic. And at least by the hurricane watch phase, if not a little bit earlier, we start producing those. They're available on weather.gov and hurricanes.gov. And we have worked, I cannot tell you how much I have preached this. Betty Davis has it on speed dial on her computer. She can show it on air. Phil Farrow, Channel 7. We work really hard with our media partners because you know them, you see them every day, you invite them into your home, you trust them, right? But we have to have that communication the same way with the emergency management community. You see today how everyone is united, how everyone has their place as a team. They're part of our team. And so by getting that message to you, it helps you make decisions. So let's say we're talking about Milton last year. How many of you were like, that's Tampa's problem? Right? October of last year, I think a lot of people down here were like, I had neighbors that were like, man, Robert, why are you working? That's Tampa's problem. I was like, really? You do? Okay, anyways. So what happened? That graphic, yeah, the wind may have had some yellow. That's tropical storm force, the weaker side of tropical storm force. The flooding rainfall, okay, that's fair game, right? We're on the dirty side of the storm. That tornadoes. It went from yellow and eventually became orange. Little telltale sign, right, of what we might be expecting. Basically, that graphic gives you lets you go into the forecaster's head. And that's a really big thing when you're trying to make decisions. So, let's go back to Ian in 2022. Yeah, 2022. All the years start blending in together. So it's like, okay, storm's coming. got to get over to Lee County, put up the shutters. My dad's on oxygen. My dad had fibrosis, was oxygen dependent, couldn't stay home. He had very strict orders. Robert, I am not getting in an ambulance. Anybody been there before? Who wants to tell the 92-year-old that they can't drive? Right? That's a tough one. If he can't drive and he won't leave in an ambulance, he doesn't want to leave. Emergency manager in the county is like, you gotta get out. Who's been there before? Hopefully not too many people, but. And so this is where the information meteorologically has to make the bridge to action. We lost over 100 people in Lee County to drowning. Every single one of those deaths was preventable. I took it a little personally. Every time the medical examiner would report another fatality and the cause of death, I would read on it. Why? Why did they pass away? What was the outcome? What led to that outcome? And there's one thing that I kept finding was social isolation. That's a big deal, right? That's why groups like this are so important. That's why caregivers are so important. Because it's not just your presence in terms of the life activities. It's that stability to help steer someone to safety, to what is right, to keep them ahead of the danger. So I just leave that there. I know that's a really serious thing and I try to be lighthearted, but it is really important. So just to give you an idea, yes, I did engineer a solution. My dad did drive across Alligator Alley and they made it over to my house and they stayed with me for a month. I live in West Pines. Okay? His doctor was incensed with me, and that's fine. All right. There we go. Okay, we good? His doctor was a little incensed with me. Not because of the jerry-rigging of a solution for the oxygen or, all of that situation. I know. You're not going to tell a 92-year-old no. I've learned that the hard way. But he's like, Robert, you never got a refill of his prescriptions. They were with me for a month. They had a month's worth of prescriptions. We were good. The doctor's office was unavailable for 2 months. Right? Because there was a hurricane that wiped out a lot of the infrastructure. That includes doctor's offices. So I got to go see some of Memorial's finest in the urgent care on Sheridan Street. And the attending physician was like, you're clinically insane. So we worked it out. They pulled up his my chart. They were able to see exactly his doses, besides the bottles we had. He wanted to make sure he read the doctor's notes, all of that. Why is that important? Because he was on a trial. He was on a clinical trial. And the specialty pharmacy over there was the one running it. The same specialty pharmacy located in the hospital that took water. So we worked that out. Thankfully, they had restored operations. I ran over there, got the prescription, came back. But I bring it up because imagine we have jerry-rigged it for my dad who is oxygen dependent to drive over. They are in the car and my mom doesn't want to leave. Why doesn't my mom want to leave? Stuff. Everything is insured except one thing in the house. What is it, the one thing that you can't insure? Well, the cat did not want to come. So she's got my dad packed. She's got them all packed. She is trying to get the cat. The cat hides under a piece of furniture. She can't lift the piece of furniture. My dad can't come and lift it, obviously. And I'm already gone at work. So the cat ended up spending a Category 4 hurricane by itself in the house. Came the next day to get her, and she never did that again. I literally sat down, opened the crate, and said, Inya, and she came out and just walked straight into the crate. But realize all of these different little things, right, could have made the difference of them saying, no, I'm going to stay. They lost power. They didn't have power, again, for almost 2 weeks. They didn't have running water in the house, safe, potable running water, for a month. And by the way, I can live without power. I cannot live without running water. I learned that lesson in 2004, okay? After about 3 days of using buckets from who knows where to flush things, you know, you want a clean shower. You want to be able to have clean clothes. I can't emphasize those comfort items, especially folks that can be agitated, right? How many folks here are caregiving for someone that has memory concerns, right? That agitation, that confusion is bad enough at times on a good day. Then you throw in this other, you know, symphony of chaos. There's nothing you can do to control it. And so even something as simple as the same laundry detergent to clean the clothes so it's familiar, to comfort things, lower the tension. That was a detail that I didn't think about until I was washing their laundry, and I'm like, are you using Tide? What are you using at home? Let's make sure we get it. We talk about the expense to prepare. There is definitely an expense to prepare, both emotionally, both financially, but also I have to cart my mom to a bunch of doctor's appointments in July. I can tell you, she doesn't like going to the doctor in July or any other month of the year. She's got like 5 of them in the next 2 weeks because peak of hurricane season is coming. We learned our lesson, right? How many of you even think about that? That is the biggest lesson learned, because the ER doctor was like, do not ever let this happen again. Because the next time he could be ending up in the ER because you don't have any other opportunities for him to receive the care. So just a few things. So when we go back to the information, our agency provides information. We're a service, right? We're available to everyone. We're paid for by taxpayer dollars. We're a federal agency. But we interface with the state government. We interface with the county governments. We interface with all of those pieces of the community that serve you. We provide them the information they need, the intelligence that they need to serve you. We also provide you, depending on which way you want to receive your information, with that information as well. The problem is everybody's living in one of these. So last year, Wellington, tornadoes, big tornadoes. Everyone's got these out taking pictures. Cell phone towers aren't necessarily working. So they're seeing the tornado. They may have heard about the warning because they were watching television, but this is not necessarily going on. Redundancy is important. So when we're looking at information, how many of you read newspapers? Yeah. How many of you listen to the radio every day? Right? Who here likes to watch television in the morning with their coffee or their tea? Right? All of us have our routines to gather information. For a lot of folks, it's quickly becoming this and only this. And what's dangerous with that is you put the blinders on. And that's something that we're finding is more and more difficult to break folks out of. So that's not a generic thing to, everybody, but with certain segments of our population that are already socially isolated, you add another factor like this. My dad was 92, but he loved technology. The cat may have not made it over, but the iPad sure did. And when the Wi-Fi goes out, Lord help us, okay? So having comfort items, having a backup radio so he could listen to a baseball game and leave my mom alone for a couple of hours, that was really important. His favorite blanket, some of his favorite clothes, having that in the go pack was really important. But also involving him in the process of we're leaving because of this threat. There's a balance between there's too much information, it's agitating, right? But also he needs to buy into why, we're going. Because he didn't want to leave. He's like, Robert, I know it's coming here, but I really don't want to leave. And I'm not going out in an ambulance. I don't care how much I like the firefighters in the firehouse down the street. I'm not going with them. By the way, that was Lee County's plan. Because he was so oxygen dependent at that point. So that's where having that conversation, having that understanding, practicing it. So his birthday was in April. So every April, when he was on the special needs registry, we would get a birthday card from Lee County Emergency Management. And the birthday card was pretty much saying, happy birthday. Is your special needs stuff still up to date? Do we have your latest cell phone number? Is everything cool with the contact info? Do you need to add any other items? Are you on any new therapies we need to know about? And that was kind of the cue for my mom and I to sit down with him and say, hey, so what happens when we have to leave this year? And he would be like, I'm not leaving. Right, but we talked through it. And that's where you as a caregiver, whatever support you need, whatever it is, those conversations, you're uniquely qualified to have them. So there's another thing, heat. And I'm bringing this up because we think back to Irma. I think back to Charlie in 2004. The day after Charlie was obnoxiously hot. It was so obnoxiously hot, we were having severe thunderstorms in areas without, like people without power after the storm. And it was a combination of just the obscene. It was like, I felt like it was 1,000,000 degrees outside, and you have thunderstorms that are producing hail. It's just, and you're like, August the 14th, why are you worse than August the 13th? The thing that comes in when you're, especially when you're working with situations where you're taking care of someone else, is that heat, what you perceive. So let's say, how many of you are professional caretaking? Okay. How many of you live with the person you're caregiving for? My mom's aunt lived in Miami-Dade County. She passed away in 2020. She was a special needs client of that county, and she was also a client of the Goodlet Senior Center in the city of Hialeah. Had a very thorough hurricane preparedness program. I remember one time she came home with like this bag full of stuff. And so I show up from work one day and I'm like, it's my mom's aunt, so it's my grandmother's sister. I'm like, Nina, what is that bag? Why does it say hurricane on it? What happened? Like, she's like, oh, they went over we went over the plan, and so I've got my water in here and all that. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, are you gonna stay home when the storm comes? She's like, no. I'm like, well, where are you gonna go? I'm gonna go with your cousin. My cousin lives in South Dade in an evacuation zone. So those are the kinds of discussions, right, that they wanted to prompt with that. But what happens is, a lot of people don't think about it because they think, okay, I'm gonna go to this family member that's safe, and so those things have to be pre-planned. The thing with heat is she didn't have air conditioning at home. So that trip to Goodlet Senior Center was her cool down every day. On Saturdays, my cousin would go and they would be going to the grocery store. On Sundays, that was their movie theater day. So those were their cool offs on the other days. If my cousin couldn't go, I would go, my mom would go, whomever, one of us would go. We would substitute. She would not know the difference. She's like, oh, yay, I have my social calendar today, right? But it makes a difference. I go home, I have air conditioning, right? I go to sleep at night. Her body is warming up every day. So that cool down was essential. Without air conditioning, right, if we have a disruption, what ends up happening, we find that the mortality, people pretty much cook over a few days. And it's not the afternoon sun necessarily, it's that nighttime I can't lower my body temperature enough. And heat illness starts to become more and more of a risk until it appears. Why does this always get linked with hurricanes? It's kind of like carbon monoxide poisonings because people are running generators where they shouldn't be. The heat risk just goes up. So in normal times, Broward and Miami-Dade counties are participating with our office in a heat experiment. And this is something, we're now in the third heat season, if I remember correctly. And we're seeing if us lowering our heat advisory and extreme heat warning criteria, a few degrees of heat index. So with a heat index of 105 for a couple of hours or more, or 110 for a couple of hours more will lead to either the advisory or the warning. Those are 3 degrees of heat index cooler than the rest of the surrounding area. The experiment is to see if by us calling the attention to this a little bit earlier, if it lowers the risk and the impacts to the community. So far, it's been a pretty interesting set of results. The question now, we're trying to calibrate, are we doing it too much? So we're trying to gauge, and this is actually something that came out of our involvement with supporting the Surfside building collapse. That was one of my first experiences with all of the heat risk stuff. But why is this important after a hurricane? Because there may be a point where most of the area is un-air conditioned, right? No one has widespread abilities to cool down. And so you may see us lower the heat advisory criteria to 100 degrees of heat index, which is like 11 a.m. on any random day in the summer most of the time around here. But when we don't have that ability for folks to cool down, when we don't have that ability for relief, it allows that heat exhaustion threat, that heat illness risk to climb up. And so that's another part of the conversation that we intend. Hopefully we won't have to experience that this year, but it is one of the services that we implement after an event. I've been speaking for a long time. We've all been kind of having lunch. Are there any questions? I went through a lot. Yes?
When we're talking about the weather and the information, we've been reading and hearing how this new administration has been changing the type of information and science that is available. Do you think any of those changes might be impacting this hurricane season? That, or will it happen at a later point? And how should we accommodate that perhaps there's not quite as much information coming out or as timely if there are staffing shortages or other science-related things that are no longer in favor? And I'm not trying to be political, I'm just trying to be sure that information we've come to rely on or expect, what level is going to be maintained in what time frames. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really important question. Thank you for asking it. So our scientific integrity policy, let me get that word out, at NOAA has not changed. In Weather Service, our mission has not changed. And so our goal, one of the nice things about the National Weather Service, while we are a federal agency, we're very tied in with our community. There's 122 weather forecast offices around the country. Our office has been serving South Florida since the late 1800s. Our first office was up at Jupiter Lighthouse when it was the seat of Dade County back then. We've been in South Florida ever since providing a service. So our forecasters live in the community. We have 8 forecasters right now, or what normally would be 13. So that is, that is something that is a little bit different maybe this season than previous seasons. But at the same time, our commitment doesn't change. Our mission has not changed. The tools that we have available to us, we're continuing to use. The scientific process remains, and it's very durable for this. And at the same time, we're hoping that we can continue to innovate. This year, so most people are familiar with the National Hurricane Center. It's our specialist unit. So going back to medicine, our local forecast office is like your family doctor. If your family doctor could also triage you in the emergency department at the hospital if you showed up there. So we handle both the routine and the non-routine. But we have peers in different specialties. The Hurricane Center is one of them. Storm Prediction Center in Oklahoma does work with severe thunderstorms and fire weather. We have the Weather Prediction Center, which does a lot of the flood forecasting and heavy rainfall potential. Our job is then to take their overall expertise, very similar again to how your family doctor takes things from your specialist, so your cardiologist, your oncologist, oh my goodness. Anyways, and then tailor that to your care plan, make sure that your medication is going well. Sometimes you have to challenge the specialist, right, for the patient's care. It's very similar, but our patient just happens to be our 6.5 counties. And that's what our focus is on. So I'm hoping that lends some comfort and some confidence in terms of our abilities. We try very diligently to be prepared. I told our staff in-house, I'm like, let's pretend that an Andrew just smacks one of our 3 counties on the East Coast again this year. What would that look like? How would we react? How would we serve, right? We then did a Wilma scenario, right, in our heads. We had a scenario like the 1928 Okeechobee hurricane, which is still our deadliest event on our record. So those are the types of tests that we're doing to prepare. And the number one thing that we emphasize to the public is you need to be ready to be on your own for at least 7 days. So having a gallon of water per person or pet per day is really important, right? Having your medications, we just went through that. Making sure that whatever your sheltering strategy is going to be, let's say you're staying home, right? Okay, can I make this as comfortable and safe as possible? If you are not staying at home, if you're going to a family member or a friend's house, same thing there. But if you are special needs, if you are a client that needs some sort of assistance in terms of maybe you need electricity, maybe you need additional care, that you're registered now. Because there's nothing more exasperating and more heartbreaking than to hear a family member that can't come and be with their loved one to help them, calling for help, and it's too late, things are already eroding to the point that assistance is not going to be available. So we try to keep the community ahead of it. We try to keep the entire team that works to serve you guys informed and ahead of that, but at some point for their safety, they have to retreat. They have to take shelter. So that's the balance. Yeah, hopefully it leaves you feeling at least a little bit confident. We still have our social media, NWS Miami on Facebook and Twitter. We have our website at weather.gov/Miami. So we're trying our best to continue the dialogue with the community as best as we can given the resources we have.
I know that they added Category 5. Do we know what that detail or what that looked like? Was it anything close to what happened on the West Coast with Ian? Is it more winds? Like, what are they saying with that?
So Saffir-Simpson scale was revised maybe a decade or so ago. Andrew was a Category 5. So we've had a few. Probably the strongest storm to ever hit U.S. was the 1935 Labor Day hurricane, went through the Keys, destroyed Flagler's Railroad down there. So Category 5 is definitely something, unfortunately, South Florida has seen in living memory, right? We're one of the few communities that's experienced one. Hurricane Michael was a Category 5 into Bay County in the Panhandle. Some folks have been like, oh, should there be a Category 6? And it's like, well, Category 5 is kind of like, at that point, most places are being erased off map. Saffir-Simpson scale is only wind related. And I'll make that connection because the previous, if you're used to the Saffir-Simpson scale of the 60s, 70s, 80s, there was a surge tie-in, but that's not really realistic. And we found that it was counterintuitive. The modeling that we have now is so much more superior to understanding the threat for an area that it's decoupled. So surge is its own land, it has its own resources, the wind with the categories, but yes, Category 3 and above is what most people consider major hurricane. That's what we, in the meteorological community, when you hear people say major hurricane Irma or major hurricane Maria, that's what they're referencing. The last time a major hurricane's core went through Broward County, we're probably looking at 1950 with King. So it's been a very long time. The 1940s were not kind to Broward County. The late 40s were spectacularly busy here. So King, you realize they had experienced maybe 2, 3, 4 major hurricane cores within a certain radius of the county by that point, and we haven't seen one since. Because even with all the destruction Wilma did, the wind field that was here with Wilma still wasn't the same as what you saw with a Charlie or with Ian, where basically that buzzsaw was just destroying massive amounts of things. So that's something to keep in mind. There's no living memory for most people of that type of impact in this county.
Thanks so much. As a physician, I just wanted to make a point. A lot of people have mentioned have 30 days of medications available, but remember you can ask for a 90-day supply and a refill of your 90-day medication. So that will take you 6 months through, and that's less copay. And most physicians who know you well and you've got high blood pressure, you're going to have that forever, will give you a 90-day supply. So please ask for that.
Thank you.
I recently moved to Sunrise, so everybody is talking about all the Sunrise area, it's flooding all the time. So do you have a map? Because I live in front of the arena, so what is going to happen over there?
So I think most people, when they're talking about the Sawgrass area flooding, they're talking about the parking lots of Sawgrass Mills Mall.
Okay.
Most of the houses in and around this area, you're looking at 1980s to 1990s stock. So by then, most housing has to be built above a certain level that existed at the time, the 100-year floodplain. So you can look at the new flood maps. Broward County has those. There's two types of maps when we talk about flooding. The storm surge planning zones, which are in the book, is one set of them. There's another one, it's the risk of seeing a flood event in an area over a given return cycle. So in a given year, like a 100-year flood means that you have a 1% of experiencing that kind of flood every year. And so that's the map, and I believe you can get that on, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's on Broward.org. I'm pretty sure it's either in emergency management or in the GIS map, and then you can click on the GIS. Okay. Realize I have 6 counties, so everybody's got in a slightly different place. But in the GIS, so I believe if you go Broward.org, there's like a search box, and you can type in like GIS flood map, and it should pop up in one of the first few on the search. And they're relatively new. I think we're in 25, I think, what was it, 23 when they came out? 23, 24. So they've been recently updated. They're usually updated every 5 to 10 years depending on the type of map, but at least every 10 years they're updated. And that's what determines if you're required to have flood insurance by your mortgage holder or not. So that's an effort that FEMA leads, and typically the county is the local holder of the information, so you can look at it. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
In terms of the medication, I think also when there's a state of emergency, some of the rules change, and you're able to access it a little sooner for insurance.
Yes. So if I call to the pharmacy today, they are going to send me a month just
Okay.
for the emergency? I don't think so. I'm going to call.
Yeah, I would say reach out to them, because they may just be able to change you from a 30-day to a 90-day.
No, I have a 90-day.
You have a 90-day.
But what happens if the emergency is when I just have a week of
They-
supply?
They should be able to advance you, I think it's 2 90 days, right?
Yeah, if you have a refill,
Yes,
you
I
should
have
be
a
able to
refill.
contact your pharmacy, and they'll be able to tell you exactly what you can get and for how long, once the declaration is made. But they shouldn't tell you you can't get medication without. And if that's happened, then that's something to talk to the pharmacist to see what happened. But we need the declaration, but once you have the declaration, they can't just say, we don't feel like it, no, they have to provide you.
Okay, the only problem is that I can plan that. I just have to wait to the emergency.
The plan is having the refill in the system, so you don't have to call the doctor asking
No,
for
I
it.
know. I have the refill in the system, and I have 90 days of life, but sometimes, without any emergency, I run out because they didn't send the medication on time.
That's a little bit different.
Yeah. No, but it's something to check with the pharmacist
No, I know.
to make sure that, because our issue was we ran out of the refill, and his doctor was like not in business
No, I know.
until like 2 months later.
But thank you.
No, thank you, and welcome. At least you're pretty high and dry in Sunrise. Typically, not an issue with search, definitely, and the flooding rainfall threat. I mean, I don't know how many folks remember Ada in 2020. We had over 20 inches of rainfall in Broward County in one night. Yeah, that was, I saw water in places I hadn't seen, and I've lived in Broward County pretty much since 1995. And there's been some interesting rain events in this county, but that one was one for the western parts of the county that I think opened a lot of folks' eyes to just anybody has vulnerability. It doesn't mean you have to be in a flood zone or in one of the areas that is at higher risk. You put enough water down, the bathtub eventually fills. Any questions? I know there's a lot of details about hurricanes and the forecast that can be confusing. Our office is a 24-hour operation. Emergency management is our biggest partners in the county to try to provide that local connection and context. But if there's something, especially blue skies, that we can do to clarify something, please feel free to reach out. Y'all have my contact info. Well, it's pretty easy. If you take my first name that's in the book, you put a period after my first name, you take my last name that's in the book, and then you add at noaa.gov, you can email me. So noaa, noaa.gov. Go. Because I would rather answer questions now than have you all not have the resources later. Like I said, this is a pretty near and dear item to my heart because I have been in the caregiver shoes ×2, and anything that in that stressful time that you can do to be better prepared takes the stress off of everybody, including your loved one that really needs you. So